wherever I went in 2008, I found myself quoting Gandhi as we sort of watched this gory internal details of market fundamentalism exposed in the crash. The quote I kept using was his description of the 7 social sins, which are a world of wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, knowledge without character, commerce without morality, science without humanity, worship without sacrifice, and politics without principles. It was even harder, I think, as we saw the response to the crisis. You had the central bankers scrambling, you had summits and communiques and conferences of all kinds, and at the end of it, while a few bankers were sort of ritually castigated on television and a few automakers, you know, were dragged through the media before having piles of cash thrown at them, nothing really changed. I mean, you got a few minor tweaks around some regulations, and even as you were making those minor changes, there was this outcry from business that this was going to be the death of creativity and the death of innovation and the death of growth as we've known it, if we even, you know, needed to make minute changes in the regulations. But for the 1.4 billion people at the other end of the spectrum, everything changed. The World Bank told us that something like 800 million more people, 89 million more people slipped down that threshold of the $1.25 mark. They say that something like 300,000 more children died than would have died otherwise as a direct consequence. And for women in particular, who take the hardest hits of all of these crises, the consequences were very dire. And what you talked about, this geopolitical shift in power, for civil society, what that translates to is that any despot from, where is it, Azerbaijan to Zimbabwe, can now operate with impunity if either they have, you know, control of energy resources, or they provide access to markets, or they can provide capital, or the rest of the Western world is just too distracted with matters economic to bother about things like human rights, to bother about things like civil society freedoms. In CIVICUS' Civil Society Watch program, for example, over the last 2 years, I think we've tracked something like 100 different legislation and policy changes that have the direct effect of constraining civil society space. And this is not just something that's happening in, you know, what we used to think of as the rogue regimes or the fringe elements of it. This is now something that's happening in what Kumi used to refer to as the receding democracies as opposed to the emerging democracies.